In a world searching for moral clarity, in a time when truth is often drowned out by noise, a new voice rises. From the ancient wellsprings of Torah wisdom to the urgent conversations of today, this is the 70 Nations Broadcast Network, a global platform uniting rabbis, rebbetzim, and Noahide leaders, bringing timeless truth, moral courage, and spiritual strength to every corner of the world. Here, families are strengthened, marriages are renewed, faith is awakened. Here, truth is not softened, it is spoken, boldly, clearly, without compromise. Across continents, across cultures, across all 70 nations, one message resounds: light over darkness, wisdom over confusion, purpose over despair. This is more than a network. This is a movement. Welcome to the voice of moral clarity. Welcome to the voice of unity. And now, from a man who has stood behind the pulpit, who has worn the uniform of a United States Marine, who has walked the path from pastor to Noahide, comes a broadcast that challenges, confronts, and calls men and women to spiritual courage. This is Called Out of Edom, hosted by Jeremy McMillan, a voice forged by conviction, a message grounded in truth, a call to step out of confusion and into spiritual clarity. My friends, you are not here by accident. The spiritual call has gone out and you have answered. Welcome to the 70 Nations Broadcast Network.
Welcome to the 70 Nations Broadcast Network. My name is Jeremy McMillan, and this is Called Out of Edom. A lot to cover. Really, just this video primarily is just an introduction about who I am, kind of where I've come from, the direction that I would like for this show to go, and really whatever's in between, whatever Hashem puts on my mind to share. That's basically what the plan is at this point. So, just I can promise you this: as we move on, the shows will get better. They'll be more defined, and I think there'll be better content. I'm pretty excited about it. I do find myself, though, at times, overthinking things, getting a little scatterbrained. It's harder to stay on task sometimes. So bear with me, hold me accountable. This is something that I want to do every week, and whatever Hashem's been putting on my mind to study for the week is ultimately what I would like to put out here. But also, what I have found is there are people that get put in your path that ask questions, and ultimately faith always comes into view, into question, and I don't think that that's an accident. I believe that, honestly, where we are today, we're all curious, and we're all, I don't want to necessarily say arguing, but that is kind of accurate. We debate, I guess, on the nature of God, who God is, and I guess in my mind, if you believe in the Torah, if you believe in the Tanakh, or even what Christians call the Old Testament, there is coming a day, based off of passages that we read, that shows us that the entire world will know who God is. And we will no longer have to have conversations about who God is, whether the God that I claim to serve is the God of creation, or if it's the God that the Christians claim to serve, or the Muslims, the Buddhists, whatever the case might be. We're all going to know. And just that recognition in itself, the idea that world enlightenment is going to be a reality, it's pretty awesome. And I think it's pretty exciting. I strongly believe that the world is moving in that direction. So those type of conversations that I have with people fairly regularly is I find very fascinating. I believe in the Torah. I believe in God's law. I believe in His prophets. I believe in the writings. I believe those things to be accurate. I believe them to be God's message to humanity, not just of what He wants and requires of His creation, but it's the answers to the test for us, in my opinion. I believe that God gives us the insight to the questions in life, the way to better ourselves, the way to improve our environment and be co-creators with the God of creation on a daily basis. So that's definitely central in my mind, that God's Torah, the Hebrew Bible in general, is the Word of God. It's divinely inspired, and it is the roadmap for those that choose to study it, and or to even listen to those that have studied at such a level that they've uncovered things that maybe you or I haven't uncovered yet. I appreciate those type of teachings. Just a little bit about myself. My name, once again, is Jeremy McMillan. I'm 44 years old. I live in Jacksonville, North Carolina. I'm originally from Mansfield, Ohio. I left Mansfield, Ohio in 2001. I joined the Marine Corps. I was active duty from 2001 to 2009. I grew up in the church. My father's side was predominantly Protestant. My mother's side was Catholic. So I always found, I never really actually looked at it at the time of just the differences between the two. I never really put a lot of thought into it at the time. Down the road I would. It's kind of interesting that I've seen statistics that say there's approximately 44,000 different denominations of Christianity. I'm sure that, there's probably not, obviously for that vast number, there's probably not huge changes in between all of them. I don't know all of them, but that's not a small number, so, but I did grow up in the church, and ultimately, I didn't really follow the Christian path once I left home. I guess I still believed in it, but I didn't really practice it. I was just living life. But, with the wars that were taking place during my service, I would say I had some pretty rough stuff happen, right? I'm very grateful to God at this point that He has allowed me to live, and that, He saved me and protected me during those times. But what's interesting is in Isaiah, where it talks about like the God of creation is the only Redeemer. He is the only Savior. There is none before Him. There is none after Him. He was the only one at creation. There was no other. He did it all. He creates good. He creates evil. He is the author of every molecule that exists. There is nothing that comes without His knowledge or without Him ordaining it. But I always viewed those things as, talking about God specifically as being synonymous with, the Christian man God, Jesus, right? And I didn't really, like I would say most, I viewed those type of passages and just, I thought that those were also speaking specifically about the man God Jesus, I didn't realize at the time that that was false, that God has no form, that God is not a man. So I kind of fell into the category with everyone else at that time that was led astray and took those type of passages to and I inferred my belief system into those passages when those passages weren't giving any room for Jesus, right? Or anyone else. So when I would fall on hard times, or when God really would save my life, I attributed all of those things to, at that time, my Christian faith and the belief system that the Christian faith brings. And it wouldn't be till years later that I would learn that the God of creation is not the God of the Christians. The God of creation does not have a form. The God of creation is not a man. And I didn't know that. I just went along with what I was taught. It wasn't until years later that I started to learn what the Jewish people taught. And obviously there was a conflict between what the Jewish people taught and what I had learned being in the church. And so ultimately I was faced with a decision on what I was going to do with the information. I was either going to remain in a lie, which is Christianity, and I guess be comfortable, but know that I'm living a lie, or I was going to take the information that I was receiving about who God really is, the God that the Jews teach, the God that the Jews serve, and I was going to do whatever it took to follow the God of creation, the God that the Jewish people taught. So it was uncomfortable, and I know I've skipped a lot because I am a former Christian minister. I did have a ministry. I was a street preacher. I would also preach in churches, but I primarily felt the need or the calling to preach in the streets because of my background being God saving me from some pretty traumatic issues just from my time of service. But I was also a severe alcoholic heading very quickly to the grave, but God gave me another chance at life. And when I say God, it's the God of creation, not the God of Christianity. I believe it was the church ultimately that was the beginning of my learning and the understanding of the knowledge of who God is. Now, that's why I was talking specifically about being, once I got to the point where I recognized that the God of Christianity was not the God that the Jewish people taught. It was not the God of the Hebrew Bible. It was not the God of creation. When I was at that point, I had to make a decision whether I would be comfortable and stay and live a lie and be part of the community that I had been a part of for so long with the ministry that I had, or I was going to follow the God of creation, the God that was my Savior, my Redeemer, the one specifically that the Jewish people taught of. He was the one that saved me. He was the one that brought me out of harm's way. He was the one that gave me another chance at life. And I had the option of following him no matter where it took me, regardless of, how uncomfortable it might be, or I was going to, be comfortable. And I chose to step out of my comfort zone and leave the church. And man, what a ride it's been. And what's interesting, though, is I think through the hard times and through the uncertainty and through the discomfort, God became more and more evident in my life. I saw the evidence of God I just over and over again. You think of Abraham being called out with his family out of idolatry, out of Ur-Kasdim, being brought to a place that God would show him, that God was going to give to his descendants. And interestingly, Abraham's like, God, I don't even have a son. How is this going to work? That's exactly it, though. You see, when you don't see how it's going to work, but yet you know that your connection to the source, your connection to the one that gave you the breath of life, that breathed the breath of life into you, when you're listening to that connection, and you don't see how God's going to do it, but yet you listen and you follow, miraculous things happen. It's a great thing. It's over and over again. I say that was the hand of God. Only God could have done that in my life. Only God could have helped me here. I only was able to pay those bills because God made those parts move. I never saw it coming. I really thought, I'm not gonna be able to pay these bills this month. I'm not gonna be able to do this. Every time, God has never let go of me. So that's the awesome part about leaving the church and the uncertainty that you feel naturally of leaving your community. But yet God shows up, and he continued to show up, and he continues to show up. So I'll go wherever he tells me to go. I'll do whatever he tells. Listen, I'm human. I'm only human. I mess up. I'm stubborn at times. I go my own way. I get upset. All of these things. And God kind of gives me room and lets me to vent or make the mistakes. And then when I realize that what I'm doing is clearly going the wrong direction, I come right back, and he, with open arms, accepts me and tells me to get back on track, and I do. And it can be hard, but it's 100% worth it to have the connection to God that I feel that I have. I hope you have. I hope that your connection is growing. So that's kind of where I've come from. I'm sure that there are things that we can speak about of all the things that I've talked about, maybe in a little bit more detail. These are kind of very broad strokes that I'm giving right now. So I apologize for that. But one point that I do want to bring up is, because if I would have been, like I said, I had a ministry in Christianity when I started to realize that Christianity was false. It was the concept of the Sabbath that I started to have questions about, the seventh-day Sabbath, that I started to have questions about. Why was it in Christianity that I was taught, and I know that not every denomination teaches this, but this is what I was taught. I was taught that the seventh-day Sabbath no longer was a necessity. Now, let's break it down a little bit, because as a Gentile, I'm not required to keep the seventh-day Sabbath anyhow. That was not for me. I was not out Mount Sinai. I was not out Mount Sinai. My parents' parents weren't at Mount Sinai. I'm a Gentile. I'm not Jewish, so that doesn't belong to me. But what I was taught in the church was there is now no Jew nor Greek. We're all one, in the J-man, and that we've been grafted into what already exists, and so this stuff belongs to us. But that's all nonsense. Grafting is definitely against the law. That's not real. I didn't know that when I was leaving the church, but it was the point. The point I'm getting at, the questions that started to come to me in my studies was, how is it that the seventh-day Sabbath could be done away with? When it says that it's eternal, when it says that you will maintain this as a sign between the God of creation and the sons of Israel through all of your generations, it's an eternal covenant. Well, I view things based off of evidence. And then when I look at the context of these passages, like Exodus 31, when you look at the context of these passages, and it's the very plain text, I'm not talking about what it says specifically in Hebrew, how you can break all of that down. Just what it says in the plain translation, we see that it specifically says that it's eternal, and it's to be kept in all your dwellings and throughout all of your generations. Well, I still see Jewish people being born. So if they're still being born, and their parents, all these Jewish people are having children, are they not, based off the context of those scriptures in Exodus 31, are they not still supposed to keep it then? That's what it's saying. So if that's the case, then I think that we've been given a mile marker to not cross. Like, this is a very explicit point of the scripture that says, hey, it's eternal and all of your generations will maintain this. It's an eternal sign between God and the sons of Israel. So I don't necessarily know how the church gets around that. I started asking questions specifically to people that had been in the church a lot longer than myself. And excuse me, I apologize. But initially, people wanted to, tried to answer my questions gently, I would say. But I never viewed their answers as adequate. There had to be more. This doesn't make sense. It didn't add up to me in my head. So if Christianity was saying that the seventh Sabbath was done away with, but yet the Hebrew Bible says that it's eternal and you're to maintain this through all of your generations, which one is correct? Because in my mind at the time, they both couldn't be correct, but I was totally open to listening to those that had been around the church a lot longer than myself to give me an adequate answer. Because my view was, if I had seen this, and it's other people had to have seen it as well. The Sabbath has been a point of contention throughout church history. So I would learn later. But in this situation, why is it that I don't feel that I'm receiving adequate answers to these, what I feel it should be a fairly basic question? So the more and more that I studied, I started to stumble upon videos on YouTube from people like Rabbi Tovia Singer, Rabbi Michael Skoback, and I'm watching these videos. And my initial thought process was, I'm going to take the information that they're giving, and I'm going to prove them wrong. So I did just that, except for I did not prove them wrong. I proved myself wrong, and any answer that I had received to that point was proven wrong. Okay, so now what do I do? What's the next step? The church is not doing what the Bible says to do. So I have a choice. It got to the point where my decision was I was going to leave the Protestant church and go to the Messianics. I, at that point, hadn't come to the conclusion that Jesus was not God and he was not the Jewish Messiah. I hadn't come to that conclusion yet. This was all very systematic. Some of you may have been through this as well. So basically what ultimately happened is I start to move toward the Messianic movement, and they're giving me information, and I started to recognize that is not accurate. And then it got to a point where maybe none of this is accurate. Maybe Christianity is not true. That was a tough pill to swallow. Once I did come to the realization that it wasn't true, it was actually my brother who had come to the conclusion and shared the information. I didn't find it on my own. But when I was presented the information, it was a tough pill to swallow. That what I had been taught my entire life was false. So that was tough. I think, I'm 44 now, so I think I was around 40, 41. It was about roughly 3 years ago when this all happened, 3 to 4 years roughly. But here we are, going strong, still serving the God of creation, learning, always learning something new, always trying to improve and sharpen my connection, and excited about that. And I mess up from time to time, but I know that God has given us the capacity to return, to receive, forgiveness for the things that we've done, and move on and grow. So that's great. When I first had come out, I thought that I was supposed to be keeping the whole Torah, I didn't know what the 7 universal laws were. I didn't know about like the Noahide movement. So ultimately, I tried to keep the Torah, thinking that's what I was supposed to do. And to be honest with you, as I was doing that, that's when I started to, listen to other people and learn that you can't even keep the Torah based off of just the written Torah. There's more to it. So in all actuality, you think you're doing something, you think that you're doing the right thing, but you're not, because you don't have all of the information. So as I learned that, obviously things felt more complicated and I was more confused, and I recognized that, you know what, I think I'm going to need someone to learn under. And I happened to find a local rabbi who was teaching Noahides, and I started to learn. And I started to get books and started to study books, studied, of course, the Parsha, the weekly Parsha, and other books that we can talk about down the road. But it's exciting that I've had the opportunity to meet more people and share the Noahide code with, and to learn with, because I don't know everything. Just to be clear, as I'm learning, I want to come on here and share, and I'm sure there's going to be things that are missing, and by all means, please say something. I have an email that you can send anything that you, any ideas that you have or anything that I might be wrong on at calledoutofedom@gmail.com. Shoot me an email. If I'm missing something, by all means, please. I don't know everything. I am not a theologian. I am not. I'm still learning, and I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid to say it. I mean, I understand that the process of learning is a lifelong journey. It's not the fact that I know everything today. It's a lifelong journey. But the things that I do know, I'm going to share it. And I do that on a daily basis. And I'm excited about it, actually. The people that God has put in front of me since I've been out of the church has, in some instances it's been rough, because there's been some rough conversations, but at other points it's been great to see the reaction and just to provide information to people that's, I hope, getting us closer to the Messianic era. It's getting us closer to the time when no one will have to teach about who God is, because all will know him. We're coming to a time when the third temple will be built, where it will be like what King Solomon spoke of, a house of prayer for all, that we will have the capacity to go and bring our offerings to the God of creation and have that experience that we've only read about to this point in Torah. We've only read about these things, but it's going to be an experience, hopefully in our lifetime, that we'll get to talk about. I mean, can you believe that? Look at where we are. It's pretty great. The idea of there not being any wars anymore, that it'll be world peace, is a pretty great thing. I fought in 2 wars, and I can tell you that it's not, the outcome is not good regardless. You bring scars from it no matter how you look at it. Your life is not the same. Your mentality is different. The things that you see, the things that you do, all of those things stain you, it stains your life. And it's going to be great when we get to the point where we don't have to train to kill one another anymore. That's going to be great. I think that's going to be a huge step that I think we ultimately take for granted, the idea of peace. Because at any given time, the world could be in an uproar, and your children and your children's children could be sent off to fight and die in some land that, you don't even have a choice. I can't wait for all that to be over with. It's going to be pretty awesome. But we're not there yet, so we definitely need a strong, sharpened military to protect our nation. I 100% agree with that. But hopefully in our lifetime, we're going to see the point where we don't need it. No nation's going to need it. So we're going to learn God's commandments. We're going to learn God's law. The whole world is going to know of the 7 universal commandments. We're all going to follow it. Obviously, if you're Jewish, you're going to follow that covenant. And if you're not, if you're a Gentile, you're going to follow the covenant that God made with Noah. And it says all of his descendants. And that's where we get the 7 universal commandments. In my opinion, I believe that you can show explicitly or implicitly the 7 commandments within the Genesis 9 covenant. I know that they're throughout Torah. It's an index. But when you look at it, I believe that you can see it. I know that not everybody agrees with that. Totally fine. Let's break it down. Well, we're not going to do that today, but the goal is to do just that. And be Torah-based and be able to see these things. I would like to argue as well that through Genesis alone, you can see instances where it's obvious that people were aware of the measuring stick of morality that God provided the nations. I think that it's very evident. And we also see people doing things that are against God's law, and then we see judgment passed. It's a consistent theme, and I don't believe that it's really any different today for the most part. But yeah, that's ultimately, I believe that you can show those things, and we'll cover it. We'll go through it. We'll talk about those things. The idea of salvation. When you're talking to a Christian, you could be utilizing the same words, but talking right past each other because their definition for specific words is different than what you might know now reading through the Hebrew Bible. Some of that is redemption. Some of those things, those words, you could be utilizing the same words and talking right past each other. So we need to define terms. The order of the books, the order of the Hebrew Bible, the Christian Bible, or what they call the portion of the Old Testament, they've rearranged the order of the books. Why would they do that? What sense does that make? When actually I believe, and I haven't read it in a long time, but I believe it was in Luke. Luke actually says that the way that the Jewish people order the Hebrew Bible through the Torah, the prophets, and the writings is how it's supposed to be. So for whatever reason, the church decided to flip things around, move books out of the order that they were originally set. We're conditioned that when you pick up the 66 books of the Christian Bible, and on one page it says Old Testament, and then one page it says New Testament. You're conditioned to believe that those things exist today. But yet, when you look at Jeremiah 31 specifically, and the stipulations in its context of the new covenant or renewed covenant, based off of context and evidence, it's clearly not here. And I mean, that to me is a problem, and to a lot of other people. I'm not the only one. Some people, but Christians sometimes say, well, yeah, but it's coming. Okay, fine. If it's not here, then why should we believe the things that Christianity teaches? If Jesus didn't do the things that we know that the Jewish Messiah is supposed to do, but he'll do it in his second coming, then why do I have to believe him now? It doesn't make any sense. I didn't think those. I say it doesn't make any sense now. At that time, though, I definitely thought it made sense. I clearly didn't have the same thought process that I currently have. I also didn't think of how damaging and demeaning the Christian message really is. You know, the good news or the gospel. It's really not good news. It's not. It's tearing you apart. It's basically saying that God created, man in his image, but it's totally flawed. And the only way that you can actually have the connection to God is through the death and the blood, ultimately, of their man God, Jesus. That's the only way. So those type of things, you're nothing but filthy rags. You're a broken vessel. You're lowly. You can't. God doesn't even want to look at you. I mean, it's really, I never thought about those things at the time. I believed it. And I think that the reason that I did believe it and the reason that I was so willing to preach it is because I felt that way. So the message that Paul teaches and things, I felt that way. I felt like God wouldn't want to look at me because of the things I was doing. I felt like I was just filthy rags, that I was broken. And I wanted that connection back. So if you're telling me that this is what I have to do to have that connection, sign me up. I mean, I'll believe it. I did believe it. But at the end of the day, it does not reflect the Hebrew Bible. It doesn't reflect it. I really wish that I would have been a little bit more diligent earlier on to ask questions. Because ultimately, when we look at Genesis 4, where Cain's going to kill Abel, and God says, God counsels him and basically says, why are you so down? What's the problem? Do you not know that if you accept counsel and you make the right changes, you'll be accepted? And if you don't, if you refuse the counsel, then sin lies at the door and its desire is for you. But you can overcome it. God says that you can overcome the sin. You don't have to fall prey. You're not a victim. You can achieve, you can overcome. You can improve yourself. So Cain was aware that he could overcome sin, that he could overcome the anger. He didn't have to do what he was about to do next. There's a lot more that you could take from that message. This is kind of what I wanted to share at this point, was basically we have the capacity to receive counsel, process, and make the necessary changes so that we don't have to stay where we are. We don't have to, you don't need someone else to do it for you. You don't need the blood atonement of a human being. God has given us a way to be in relationship with him and have that strong connection. Our connection is through the development and the maintenance of a moral society based off of God's commandments. So it has nothing to do with the acceptance of human sacrifice, which is actually something that the Torah prohibits, by the way. But we wouldn't know that unless we read the Torah first. So what I was taught is the Christian scriptures, basically the Gospels forward, that's what belongs to you. See, everything from what they call the Old Testament, that's of the past. That's of the wrathful God. Excuse me. But you see, like the God of the New Testament's love, and He's provided you this way to be with Him. You don't need all of the blessings of what they call the Old Testament belongs to you, but none of the curses. I used to think to myself, how do I get all the blessings, but not everything else that follows if I'm not doing the right thing? I'm not accountable. Huh. Okay. That sounds really great in theory, that I can just skip through life and not have to worry about, being receiving judgment because I just believe on this dead man. But either way, ultimately, I'm excited to be here, excited to move forward with this channel, excited to see who's going to show up and excuse me, and see what we can do from here. So once again, my name is Jeremy with the 70 Nations Broadcast Network. The show is called Out of Edom, and look forward to doing more shows and connecting and see where this goes. I just want to give everybody a bracha, a blessing. I want to give everyone a blessing for long life, for health, for sustenance, and for a stronger connection to the God of creation. And also that we are moving. I want to just bless everyone that we are moving toward the time where wars will come to an end, that we will all know who the God of creation is. We will be hungry to serve and to learn more. And all of these things will be universal. Baruch Hashem, look forward to talking to you later. Have a good evening.